Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld podcast. It is July 30th, 2019, and today's topic, De-Dollarization. China and Russia avoid using the dollar by using a dollar stablecoin, Tether. We're going to get into that story and also the Senate testimony today on cryptocurrencies. There's a connection to those two stories. We've also got some stories on Libra, as well as a new challenge to Coinbase and Binance, a new Goldman Sachs, Google-backed, Richard Branson-backed exchange called The Pit. Okay, well, let's get into this story about the cryptocurrencies being traded between China and Russia. People have often speculated that Russia and China trade amongst themselves in their own currencies and that they trade in gold or gold trade notes. There's some people suggest maybe they trade in Bitcoin, but one of the problems with trading in Bitcoin is one of the criticisms of Bitcoin. It is not a stable coin. The price can change in a day, 10, 15%, either way, and it makes it difficult for commerce if you don't have a payment process. Remember, when you're talking about large transactions between countries, it's a lot different than someone who wants to buy a $50 item and it runs through a payment processor and the merchant gets $50 in value as the payment processor processes the Bitcoin from the customer and then on-sells it on the other end, and there's really no issue. That's one way of stabilizing Bitcoin for commerce. However, there is no intermediary like that when you have two countries and maybe they're dealing in millions or tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So if they're going to do that, it's going to be difficult. Or if they have large sums of money that they need to move from one place to the other, you take a few $100,000 on one end and you want to take that cash currency and move it. Well, by the time it gets to where you're going or where you want it to be, it may be worth a lot more or a lot less. So you want to move money in a stable coin if you're not going to immediately have it converted and put into a bank account or use it as part of your business records. Now, according to CoinDesk, this is very interesting here, Chinese importers in Russia are buying up to $30 million a day of US dollar Tether from Moscow's over-the-counter trading desks. Now that is an incredible amount of money, and that would be akin in the US to money laundering. All this talk about Bitcoin and the dangers of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is troublesome for money laundering, meaning it's easier to catch a money launderer. You've got the blockchain. It's not really used. There's been studies on this that Bitcoin is not really the choice of criminals. It's cash is king. Cash is what you want. But the next best thing to cash, maybe even better than cash, is a digital representation of cash that is outside the jurisdiction of the United States, and that would be Tether. Now, Tether has had some run-ins with New York. They're being sued, Bitfinex and Tether, but they are not licensed in New York. They're supposed to not deal with Americans, and if there's cash outside the system, outside the United States, it's very difficult. These types of transactions that CoinDesk is reporting on, 30 million a day, there's really not much the United States can do about this. This is different than blocking. You can block Tether in the United States. It's not going to make much of a difference because Tether is not the stable coin of choice in the United States. In fact, when we talk about the testimony in Senate today, they had a gentleman there named Jeremy Allain, and he is, I think he's the CEO of a company called Circle, which is Goldman Sachs backed, and they also own the Bitcoin cryptocurrency exchange Poloniex, and they have issued a stable coin which is backed by dollars. But the idea that Chinese importers in Russia are using Tether in order to satisfy their needs for dollars, very, very interesting. Now they can send the money back home to China in the form of Tether. And now the question becomes, and this is one of the issues that the Senate brought up when they were focused on Libra, even though the testimonies weren't supposed to be about Libra. They're supposed to be about cryptocurrencies and blockchain in general. They're not even concerned about whether Tether is 100% backed. The quote here says, one Moscow trader, nobody actually cares if Tether is backed or not. So Tether has become the equivalent, it appears, in some areas, the substitute for the US dollar. So if you've accumulated dollars overseas and you want to move them internationally, well, you flip them in the over-the-counter exchange using that cash that you have accumulated, buy the Tether, then ship the Tether back. And the Tether, at least in the marketplace, has maintained, whether it has the backing or not, has maintained a stable value of about 1-to-1. And according to this article, they're talking to a guy named Oleg. Now, this person is unnamed, and who knows if this story is even real, but it says, because we don't have the name of this Russian guy, or his company, but he says business is brisk because of the Chinese merchants that come in with their bags full of cash. They fill their bags and they come in. And he says, Oleg, that they sell about 3 million worth of crypto every day, and most of it goes to China, but only 20% of it is in Bitcoin. The other 80% is in Tether. So they get their cash in Moscow, they transfer it to China. This also highlights what the Fed has pointed out before, that between 2/3 and 75% of U.S. actual cash is held overseas. So when you talk about money laundering, it can happen avoiding sanctions. It can happen using U.S. dollar cash, U.S. dollar digital equivalents like Tether. Yes, and of course Bitcoin. But to focus on Bitcoin, I think, is missing the much bigger issue. And this article, I think, points that out. Now, let's talk about what happened over at the Senate. It was a bit of a dud. You had Brown and you had Crapo, they're the head and the ranking member, not respectively, it's the other way around. Crapo is the head of the committee, and Brown is the ranking member. Brown is totally against Libra, so he was in there taking swipes at it. But they had questions from the senators, and they had 3 people there, competent individuals. Rebecca Nelson was one of them. Another one was a Professor Bar Daran. Both academics or people with much more than passing knowledge on how cryptocurrencies work. And they were basically answering very, very basic questions. But the testimony that I was interested in was Jeremy Allain, and he's from Circle. And Circle, as I mentioned, is a Goldman Sachs-backed company. And he was complaining that they have moved their international operations out of the United States and into somewhere offshore in the Caribbean. Maybe it's Bermuda, not the Caribbean. And the reason for that was that he was saying there is a lack of regulatory certainty in the United States. And the professor did point out that there's essentially 3 types of jurisdictions in the world. Those that ban it, like India and China. Those that thoroughly embrace it like cryptocurrencies like Switzerland and Singapore and Malta. And those that are kind of in the middle, like the United States and parts of Europe. And his complaint was that they really have not, and you can see, you know who writes the laws are Congress and the Senate. They did not really show any understanding of what these cryptocurrencies, what these utility tokens were. And Jeremy Allain pointed out that some of them act as commodities, some of them act as securities, some of them act as cryptocurrencies, as currencies, some act as all 3. And it does take, it's very hard to fit, as he was saying, 20th century definitions with these assets. And he was basically calling for, they need to rewrite actually legislation specifically designed with an understanding of the different types of crypto assets. Let's not call them cryptocurrencies. Let's call them crypto assets, and then determine their characteristics and then regulate them accordingly. If there's a securities component, then maybe the SEC will regulate that. If it's a commodity type, then maybe the CFTC will regulate that. But throughout the testimony, the questions were very inane, and they did focus on this idea of the 1-to-1 backing of Libra. Now, they didn't get into, and they probably couldn't understand, that the modern day cryptocurrencies, or the decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Litecoin and others, they're not backed by anything, or at least not backed by a tangible commodity or fiat currency. But they kept focusing on the fact that Libra was going to be backed, and the questions they were asking were, how are we going to prove that they back it? How are they going to secure the collateral? They were unaware, and the professor had to point out that it's not just dollars that they're backed by, that they're backed by a basket of currency, which led Senator Warren to say, whoa, hold on a minute. Does this mean that there's currency risk? Yes, indeed, there's currency risk. So there's a lot of risk in the Libra that the Senate is very much aware of. And as I mentioned, the ranking member, Brown, does not hide his contempt for not Libra, yes, but also Facebook in general. What else happened? I think that's about it that happened there. It wasn't a very enlightening. It was enlightening to the extent that they really don't know much about cryptocurrencies. What they do know, I guess the takeaway is that they understand Libra, because Libra is easy to understand because it is a direct threat to the dollar, in the sense that it aims to be a digitized version of the dollar, or a digitized version of the special drawing rights, the SDR, because it has other currencies in it. And they understand that, and they understand that there may be issues. And they mocked the idea that this was innovation, that they're using the term innovation and the unbanked as a rationale, really just to railroad people, take their privacy, and compete with the US dollar. But I thought the reason, the connection I was making to Tether and today's Senate testimony, is the real threat is the digitization for anti-money laundering, is the digitization of assets, which means you can transfer value through crypto assets very easily and avoid sanctions. And if the asset is as good as the dollar, you don't have to use the SWIFT system, and it looks like the Chinese are moving dollars via Tether from Russia to China, and I suppose with the full blessing of the Russian government. I think Oleg, the guy cited there, isn't breaking any laws probably by doing that. So millions in crypto crossing the Russian-Chinese border daily. It says there, Tether is king. Now, as to Libra, no surprise, this is what, if you've been following this channel, I mentioned from day one that this is a hairball, and they're going to have a lot of regulatory issues to work through. And in their Facebook filing, it was revealed, from what I said from day one, it may be dead on arrival. Their SEC disclosure says Libra might not ever launch. And I think that the U.S. is very hostile to it. I mean, viscerally hostile to it. Not like, well, let's see what we can do, answer our questions, and we'll regulate, it'll be fine. They're even saying that even if we regulate it, we can't trust you at all. In fact, Senator Brown was goading the professor Baradaran about, or maybe it was Tester, Senator Tester from Montana, that how we know that they're actually, Libra would actually back this stuff, even if we make laws that say that they must. And he essentially admitted, well, you know, you really can't tell. I just don't think that Libra is going to get off the ground, at least not in the form of a coin that is issued from some company in Switzerland and is a basket of currencies. They want this to be a global coin. This really is the cover of The Economist 30 years ago, the global coin based on a variety of currencies. You can call it the mark of the Mark, M-A-R, Zuckerberg of the beast. I don't think it's going to get off the ground. But as the Facebook admitted as such today in an SEC filing. A couple of other stories. We did mention that we're going to talk about the pit. Former Wall Street execs unveil the pit. Now this is to take on Coinbase and Binance. And the people backing this is they've got $70 million in funding. They're former execs from Google and Goldman Sachs. This is another reason I think that this idea they're going to ban Bitcoin in the United States is nonsense. There's so much money in Wall Street and Silicon Valley. They'll take all their wrath out on Libra, which actually is a much bigger threat to the dollar because it takes into account other currencies. It's outside the dollar. It's stable. It can be used in daily transactions instead of the dollar. It would make Facebook the police of that blockchain, and the United States would have to ask it what's on it rather than the looking on its own SWIFT system. Whereas Bitcoin, I know some people think it's going to be a global currency and it's going to be used a lot. It looks like Bitcoin is going to be, in many instances, a lot of it's going to be just locked away in ETFs and cold storage. And yeah, it'll be used, but I don't see it. I don't see Bitcoin, Litecoin, any of these being used even more than 20-30% of all transactions if it ever reaches that. But something like Libra, with its reach and with its stability, could become, if they allow it to be, a currency that gets used as much as dollars. So I just don't understand why you would turn your dollars in to get a digital representation of a basket of currencies. But that's me. I mean, there's a lot of things I wouldn't do that the rest of the world doesn't. The rest of the world does do. But I'm bringing up this pit story here just because it highlights the amount of money that Wall Street, big players, are putting into cryptocurrencies, not necessarily Libra. I was having a discussion with someone online. They were saying, if Bitcoin gets to $1 million, the government's going to ban it. And I thought, if Bitcoin gets to $1 million, the hodlers are going to own the government. They're going to be lobbying. They're going to ban anything. I just think that the U.S., as the professor pointed out today, is in that middle jurisdiction. They're already there. I mean, they have CFTC has already approved Bitcoin futures, Bitcoin physically delivered futures. The SEC already has approved tokens, send out no action letters on cryptocurrencies. So it doesn't look like, absent some draconian executive order from the president, that there's going to be any type of ban in the United States. But you never know, because there's big money involved. And just two other stories before I let you go. This is interesting. Square, which I'm very interested to find out how much Bitcoin they sold in the second quarter. We should know that in a couple of days. But they are very much behind Bitcoin only, not cryptocurrencies. They're a bit maximalist on this. But Square is talking about focusing on Bitcoin. And I thought they had this QA on Twitter the other day, and I thought they were talking about how to integrate Bitcoin into the Square app, the Cash app, a little better. And they actually, Jack Dorsey has paid, he's got a number of developers working on, I don't know what they're doing, but they're actually spending dollars to improve Bitcoin itself, not necessarily the integration of the Square's Cash app with Bitcoin. But I will report on those numbers when I get them, probably out either by Friday or early next week, how much Bitcoin has been sold through the Cash app in the second quarter. And finally, there was another interesting story coming out of Australia. There's a draft bill, and a lot of countries have these, where they ban, Europe has them, where they ban transactions in cash over a certain amount. I think Italy has them. The United States, I think they're reportable over $10,000. But I think Australia is banning cash apps over $10,000, but did not include cryptocurrencies in that amount. So I suppose you might be able to one day buy a Lambo for, I don't know what they cost, a couple $100,000 with cryptocurrencies, but you could not walk into the Lambo shop and with a pile of cash and get yourself a new car. So they say that's promising for cryptocurrencies. I think it's not necessarily promising for cryptocurrencies. I think it is not promising for cash, and I think that's a sign of the cashless society. And in a sense, they are, I guess the reason it's positive for Bitcoin is since Bitcoin is in cash, that they're actually not prohibiting a larger cryptocurrency. This is a draft law that they have and hasn't been passed yet. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's presentation or have been enjoying the Smaulgld presentations, please consider making a donation to Smaulgld via check at Smaulgld LLC or sending other items of value like silver and gold to P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire 03820, or you can send Bitcoin or Litecoin to the addresses on the screen. Hold up your phone to those QR codes, or you can become a Smaulgld patron. You can make a one-time or recurring donation on PayPal, or you can go to join one of the Smaulgld mug clubs on Subscribestar, and also visit smaulgld.com for a wide selection of Smaulgld mugs. The two mugs that you're seeing there, the Smaulgld Super Classic with the red interior and the red handle, and the Smaulgld Classic, will be shipped from Smaulgld headquarters with a note for myself. All other mugs, the beer mugs, the espresso mugs, and other Smaulgld products are available at the Smaulgld store. All the information for donating or buying mugs is on smaulgld.com and below this BitChute. And also, if you're interested in buying precious metals, you can help the site out by purchasing your precious metals via the links below or on smaulgld.com at SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and Golden Eagle Coins. You can compare pricing and shipping. Not investment advice to buy gold or silver, but if you're going to buy gold or silver, you pay no more, no less. If you're interested in those sites and you buy from those sites and you click on those links, Smaulgld will get a small commission if you do indeed buy. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.